My name is Benjamin Wakefield, and I'm the editor of Gastrointestinal Nursing, a peer-reviewed journal for nurses working in gastroenterology, hepatology and stoma care. This video is for specialist nurses who would like to contribute an article to a journal, but could do with some advice on how to get started. The first thing is to choose a topic. You can write about anything so long as it is relevant. It just needs to be something of interest to either you, your colleagues or your patients. Ideally, your article would fill a gap in professional knowledge. For example, what don't your colleagues know enough about? What would you like to understand better? Or it can fill a gap in the body of published literature. Is there something that you have tried to read about but couldn't find enough satisfactory information on? The topic you choose can have real-world practical uses in your work life. If there is a change in the way you work that you have already made, or one that you would like to make, publishing an article on it is one of the best ways to demonstrate the impact this change has on patient outcomes, satisfaction and value for money. So then you can show it to the people whose support you need. If you get the opportunity, you can choose to write about something that supports a positive change to how care is delivered in your area. The key thing to remember when choosing a topic is that it should be highly specific. No one can cover every possible aspect of a subject in one article, and it is often most interesting and useful, not to mention easier for the author, to focus on a very particular question or interaction. This might involve, instead of discussing every aspect of an illness, choosing to look at, for example, how one particular kind of therapy affects a particular measurable symptom in one specific demographic group of patients. What you choose to write about will inform the shape and structure of your article. Journals like Gastrointestinal Nursing typically publish a few very different styles or genres of article. The simplest type are comment articles. These are any short and relatively informal discussion, like something that you would find in a magazine, typically under 1,500 words. They are ideal for expressing your own personal opinions on professional topics affecting you in the workplace. If you want to write something more clinical, structured and formal than a comment, you can write a clinical case report. This is a detailed chronological account of a patient's journey, from their medical history and first presentation, typically to either their discharge and follow-up, or, in less fortunate cases, their death. Case studies offer a very valuable close-up perspective on a particular person, but one person's case on its own is not automatically generalizable to the wider population. If you want to give the bigger picture on a topic, then you can write a literature review. This is a longer article that identifies and summarizes the best evidence on a particular topic, perhaps a symptom of an illness or a therapeutic option. There are different ways to write a review. You can take a holistic approach and write what is called a narrative review, using your knowledge and intuition to pick the best sources, an approach that is typically better for broader and more familiar topics. On the other hand, you can use a more structured process, identifying certain keywords in databases and using a systematic step-by-step approach to find the relevant evidence. This is ideal when looking for information on a very specific topic, or one you don't know much about before you start writing. Finally, there is of course the research study. This covers every formal scientific process of gathering new data. Data can be quantitative, i.e. expressed as a number, or qualitative, that is, opinions that are more complex and holistic than can be expressed as a simple number. A good study is designed to be as generalizable as possible, which means controlling it for any potential bias, such as by having a control group and a large group of participants who are representative of the whole population. Research studies and systematic literature reviews are always written up using an established structure. First, this needs an introduction to explain what the study is about, and then the aims to set out what you hope to achieve, and finally the methods, which are used to spell out how this will be done. You then give the results, followed by a discussion of their implications and any limitations to the study, as well as your conclusion, which can cover its implications for practice. This structure is important to help readers skim your work and pick out the information that they need. For all other types of article, there is no such strict structure you have to use, and you will need to be more intuitive and work out one yourself. You'll still need a logical structure, which introduces the topic, explores it, and concludes it logically. writing about healthcare should be as user-friendly as possible. Therefore, your writing should aim to be as consistent and formal and clear as you can make it. Of course, getting this just right is not always easy, especially for people who don't write on a regular basis or whose first language isn't English. This is understood, and you'll only need to do your best. Your English doesn't need to be perfect the first time. Before you submit your work to a journal, it can be helpful to ask a colleague with more writing experience to check it over for errors or ambiguities. After the article has passed review, the editor will then have a chance to perfect it before it goes for publication. I can offer a few helpful tips to remember that can improve your writing. First of all, to give the impression of impartiality, you should avoid what is called the first person. This means finding ways to avoid saying I, me, we, us, ours, etc. Instead, you can use expressions like the centre, the team, the nurse, or even the author. Also, any acronyms you use should be spelled out at first use. For example, in every article where you talk about IBD, you first need to write out inflammatory bowel disease, followed by IBD in brackets. Then you can just use IBD from then on. Acronyms are useful if they make your work easier to read, but often they just make it harder, and I prefer to avoid using them if possible. Another way to help the reader is to signpost your structure. This is as simple as using logical paragraphs and headings to guide the reader. It's also a good idea to avoid repetition where you can. If something is clear, it only has to be said once, and your article shouldn't be any longer than it needs to be. Although simplicity is good, we should be careful about summarising too much and just presenting a long sequence of lists. It is good to explain in detail how things interact, and not just to point out that they exist. Lists are essential, but do not use too many of them, and you will struggle to hold readers' attention if they contain more than 3 items. Of course, good healthcare practice needs to be evidence-based, to keep patients safe and achieve the best outcomes. Therefore, the original sources of the information you use must always be given for all facts and figures. Ideally, these sources should be accessible to readers, and each source needs to be referenced within the main body of the text and in a bibliography at the end of the article. You should try to use the most up-to-date and authoritative sources available. In many cases, your best options will be official guidelines from an expert professional body or systematic reviews, such as from Cochrane, which evaluate and synthesize all existing individual studies. You will likely also want to look at certain individual studies yourself, but these should be assessed for quality and how applicable they are to your question. However, don't forget that your own professional expertise and experience are relevant sources of holistic knowledge in their own right, and you can express your opinion in appropriate situations, so long as this doesn't contradict the known evidence. When it comes to actually formatting your references, different journals do it in different ways, and you need to check this journal's style guide. This document will be available online on a journal's website and will tell you some essential things. It will tell you whether references should be given numerically or by name and date in brackets. It will also tell you how these are formatted and what information must be included in each reference. There are good habits to make referencing easy for yourself. The first is to reference as you write, rather than trying to put everything in at the end of the process. For each reference, try to provide a web link or DOI code, so the editor and readers can go straight to the source with a single click. You can consider using automatic referencing software, such as Zotero or Mendeley. Once you've learned how these work, they're far easier and more efficient than manual referencing, but they do take a little while to get used to. In many cases, it's better to show and not tell. Using a mix of diagrams, photographs, boxes, tables and charts to illustrate your article will attract your readers' attention and help them understand you more easily. Any table or figure must be named with a numbered label followed by a descriptive caption. These then all need to be referred to in the main body text at least once. I recommend using pictures wherever possible, as, for example, diagnosing and healing problems with the human body are often very visual skills. However, sourcing images with the right copyright and permissions can be a challenge, but there are plenty of options. You can take photographs of your own often. You just need to ask the subject patient's permission first, telling them exactly what you'd like to use the pictures for, and to avoid any identifying features such as their face or any tattoos. A mobile phone camera should be sufficient, but you may have a hospital photographer who can help. You can also sketch diagrams yourself with pencil and paper. If you can, and send them to an editor, they can then get them professionally redrawn for you. You can also find a lot of free-to-use medical images by simply searching on Google or Wikipedia, etc. for images marked as Creative Commons copyright license. These images are free to use, so long as you credit the original creator by name. If you can't find the image you need for free, you can also purchase pictures from a library. Editors may have a budget to spend on Adobe Stock or Science Photo Library. Charts and tables should be as clear to make sense of as possible. This means you should label each axis, use consistent units, and include all underlying data in your submission. Ideally, send an Excel spreadsheet or database that the editor can access. Converting actual numbers to percentages tends to make your results easier to understand and generalise. However, percentages should be rounded to a sensible decimal place for the sample size. It's also worth checking over your percentage values to ensure that they add up to 100%. Of course, you'll need an abstract, and this usually should be the last thing you write. It's there to advertise the article to the world and emphasise your key findings to people who won't read the whole article necessarily. An abstract needs a clear logical structure. For research and systematic reviews, you should have at least 4 parts: the background, methods, the results, and conclusions. For other article types, you can write an easy abstract if you simply summarise each section into 1 or 2 sentences each. When it comes to picking where to submit your manuscript, remember that there are all kinds of journals for different conditions, different localities, national and international, and different professional readerships. Specialist nursing journals in particular provide perhaps more editorial support for writers than medical journals, and they typically have less incentive to reject articles. Most importantly, nursing journals are the best way to reach the right specialist readership. The peer review process can be daunting, as it helps the journal by ensuring that the topic is relevant to the readership, any scientific claims made are accurate, and any recommendations that are made are safe for patients. But more importantly, it also helps the author by identifying any gaps in the article, suggesting improvements to be made, and providing alternative perspectives to think about. Reviewer comments should aim to be as impartial as possible. That's why reviewers and the author are kept anonymous to each other, although of course people often guess who they're dealing with. After all, the 2 reviewers may not agree, and in that case, it's the editor who makes the final decision. It's worth remembering that health writing is a collaborative process, and the reviewer's recommendations are there to help the author out, not to discourage them. Authors may sometimes disagree with the reviewers. This is perfectly okay, so long as the author provides a detailed description of the reasons for their disagreement. The editor and reviewers will then assess this response and come to an agreement. The big question is why you should want to write an article in the first place. There are more reasons than I have time to give now, but to summarise, writing helps you, the author, by improving your personal knowledge and critical thinking skills. It can also provide practical evidence for your achievements, which can provide important support for your personal career development. Writing also helps your patients by giving clinicians an opportunity to listen to their perspectives. By identifying potential problems, up-to-date specialist literature can protect patient safety. The results and discussions that arise from nursing literature are what guide real-world and practical improvements in care quality. If you would like further writing advice, or to discuss submitting an article, please get in touch using the email address below. Thank you for listening.